Okay, we'll give it one more minute, then we'll start up. Yeah, at 11:32. How about that? Let's make sure we have all this up. This. Okay, give me 1 second. My mom is actually calling me, and then I'll be right back. My mom is super nice and just brought me McDonald's fries, so sorry for all of you that do not have McDonald's fries. Yummy. Okay, it's 11:32. We'll just get started. So let's see. So the way what I was thinking of going through this is just I was just going to start from the top of this document and just work my way through it, just to make sure I explain every part of the exam. Go over what I say you should focus on and maybe do some examples of that. For the second part with the SQL, if you didn't see yesterday, I posted some practice questions. I'll be going over all of these and the solutions. I think if you can do these, then you're in great shape for the SQL portion of the exam. I'll just go over the modeling as well, the exploratory, and there's the Northwind model down there. But I'll just go over each part, things I think you should focus on. But before I get started on that, are there any other questions about anything else that I should be aware of before we get started? Okay, if there are, just do the raise your hand thing or just start speaking. I have the chat window on another monitor so I can see when anyone says anything. So, also with that, I have on ELC, if you look at your grades, I've graded everything except for Project 2 and the Project 2. Just last night, you should have all turned in your professional development. So I'll hopefully get through at least by tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have all that done, and then I'll try and grade the final as soon as I can. But everything else should be graded, so if you see something that you don't have a grade for, or the grade is wrong or something like that, please check it and let me know. But other than that, let's just get started going through this. So your final exam is on May 6th. So coming up in just a couple of days. In a previous announcement, I said that you would have had to take it at a certain time, but just because some of you might be in different time zones, especially if you went home to a different country or something like that, I could see that being pretty hard to do. So now it's just open Eastern time in the US from 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. So the entire day it's open. So you have the entire day to take it or to start it, but once you start taking each section, then that section is timed. So it has two parts: a multiple choice quiz, which you're just going to be taking on ELC, and a submission document with SQL modeling and exploratory questions, which there's a quiz part and a submission document, which I'll explain. So like I said, once you start a part of the test, you have to finish it within that part's time limit. Part 1 is 45 minutes for the multiple choice. Then you have 4 hours for the SQL modeling and exploratory parts. All three are in one part, so it's not 4 hours each. It's 4 hours for that whole section. On May 6th, just like we are right now, I'm going to be holding an ELC Collaborate Ultra. This isn't for tips or anything. This is just if you're doing your test and you notice some error in the test, or you have a question, or your computer crashed and you need some extended time or something like that. Just hop on there. If you take it, because obviously I can't be on for 24 hours straight, but I'm trying to do it during when you normally would be taking the exam from 2:30 to 5:30. If you're taking it during any other time and you run into some problem that you need to address with me, send me an email. I'll try to be just checking my email all the time that day. But if it's something urgent and I don't respond really quick within a few minutes, here's my number. Don't call me otherwise or anything, but if it's some like emergency, you're in the middle of the test and you need me to look at it and fix it, just send me a text message like telling me just to look at my email, or you can just tell me what the problem is over that. And then today is the review session. So I'll go over each individual part right now, but are there any other questions that you have so far? Okay, so the first part is the multiple choice. You have 45 minutes to do it, and it's just 15 questions. In my opinion, I think 45 minutes is way more than enough time. I think you can do this pretty quick. So it's 15 questions, multiple choice and true false. Know the modeling questions from the textbook notation. So if you're confused about that, you should be able to look at quiz 4 on ELC. Like for example, if you remember quiz 4 is a lot of questions like this. It's very similar to what's going to be on the final exam multiple choice part. Like for example, this is just one of the questions from this, where it's a true-false one. It gives you an example of what a model is using the textbook notation. And if you forget what the textbook notation means, these asterisks mean it's part of the primary key. In the textbook notation, when it has a many relationship signal like this, it's implying that there's a foreign key here, but it doesn't show it. By you seeing this symbol right here, you know there's an extra column here that's a foreign key for Barber in here, but it isn't showing it. And since there's a plus sign, you know that this is an identifying relationship, which means that Barber ID is part of the primary key of visit. So the primary key here of visit would be date visit, because it has the asterisk, time visit, because it has the asterisk. It has a plus sign, so you know that Barber ID is a foreign key and also part of the primary key. So it's a 3-column composite primary key. Bridget. Yep.
One of the questions I missed, it was like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Can you explain the difference between like what is a primary key of visit and what is the foreign key? Is the foreign key the Barber ID only?
So the
primary key is all 3 of them?
Yeah, so what might be confusing some people is that something can be a foreign key and part of a primary key at the same time. So just to, so I have a place to write it out. Let's do iCloud. Okay, oops. And let's make it big so we can title. Sure. Well, or can I just do Word document? Let's do new Word documents. Let's close that out. Sorry, I'm doing 2 screen recordings at once and it's kind of slowing down my computer. Okay, let's make this big so we can see it. Okay, so visit. Okay, so visit, I'm just going to write down what all the columns we know about for visit, since that's like the central one. So visit has part of the primary key. We know because of the asterisks that it has date visit as part of the primary key. Let me just keep it all in one line. We know it has time visit as part of the primary key. We know that because this is an identifying relationship, and identifying means that the foreign key of this table is part of the primary key. That's just what an identifying relationship means. So we also know that Barber ID is part of the primary key. These also have foreign keys attached to them because it's a one-to-many relationship. So there's going to be two other ones in here, but they don't have the plus sign, so they're not part of the primary key. So then foreign keys, we have Barber ID because it's a one-to-many, and the many side receives the foreign key. So it's going to be receiving the foreign key over here of Barber ID. It's already part of the primary key, but it is still a foreign key. So it's both. It's a foreign key that is part of the primary key. So we have Barber key. Service, it's a one-to-many relationship. The many side gets the foreign key. So the primary key of service is service NM. And then client, it's not an identifying relationship. This is the many side, so it gets the foreign key. We have client ID, so client ID is going to be over here. Client ID, so the table visit once created will have 3 foreign keys, and we just listed them all out, 1, 2, 3, so when grading this question would appear as this. The answer is true. As Barber ID, service, NM, and client ID. So does that clear up the confusion?
Yeah, that does. I just didn't know that it could still be part. It could still be part of the foreign key if it wasn't identifying.
Yeah, that's the little tricky part of it, is that it's it
so
can be
whatever basically whatever it's connected to, it doesn't matter if it's identifying or non-identifying. That's how many foreign keys it'll have.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that wasn't. I don't know why that wasn't clear to me.
No, it's all good. It's tricky. I think it's kind of dumb that in our class we use a textbook that uses this notation, and then almost the whole time we're working in MySQL Workbench that uses a different notation. So I can see why that's confusing. Just make sure that that is clear as you're doing the test, because that's stuff like this is almost the entirety of the multiple choice. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions with this? Yeah, JC?
So you said that it's a foreign key is a part of the primary key. Is that what you said?
A foreign key can be or is not. Like for example, service NM is a foreign key, but it's not part of the primary key.
Okay.
It can or can't be, but it's possible to be part of the primary key and also a foreign key, but date visit is just in visit. It's not in the other tables, so it's not a foreign key. But service NM is a foreign key in visit, but it's not an identifying relationship, so it's not a primary key as well. So you can have something be both a primary key and a foreign key, but not all primary keys have to be foreign keys, and not all foreign keys have to be primary keys. That's where it's tricky.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so stuff like that, and then knowing, I think there's a question or two that would ask, like, when it looks like this, how would it look like in MySQL Workbench? And it's basically what we just did. It would, even though it doesn't show the foreign keys in here, because they're just implied by the relationships, once you move it to MySQL Workbench, you would know that there would be these 3 foreign keys. That's basically what we already went over. Let's look at... Okay, so modeling question, similar to quiz 4. Just know what each one of these function does. I think there's a question or two that's like, if I want to know how many rows are in this column, would I use sum or would I use count? And you would use count if you want to know the number of rows. But if it's like, if I want to add up the numbers in this column, would I use count or sum or max? And like, you'd use sum. Just know what each one of these is actually doing. Like, they're pretty simple questions, not tricky. You just have to know what they all actually do. Any questions with that? Those I think should be pretty simple. And then you need to know about modality and cardinality. So I'll just open up these slides in the final exam. I went over this, it was maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that, maybe 3.5 weeks. And for some of the questions, it's like the entirety of the question is asking about this, so you should know this. So if you weren't a part of that Collaborate Ultra or just session that I did before, you just forgot, it was in the textbook, it was in slides. I think it was in slides before we went to spring break, so a long time ago, but I didn't specifically cover it in class. So just as a brief review, I'll go over these 3 slides, which is all it is, and then I'll show an example of it, of what type of question would be like on the exam. So we have modality and cardinality. Basically, cardinality is the thing we've been doing this whole time, whether it's like if it's like a one-to-many relationship or a many-to-many, like if it can have just one or if it can have many. The thing that we're adding to that is modality, which is just optionality, whether a relationship has to exist or does not have to exist. So it defines the minimum number of instances, like if it's okay to have 0 of a relationship or if you have to have at least 1. And if that's confusing, let's jump to the next slide. So sometimes it's expressed as like a 0 then a comma, where the first number you see is the minimum, and then the second number you see is the maximum. Where the modality is just talking about the first number, or the optionality of the first part of it. So if you can have 0 in a relationship, and also if this is still confusing, I think it's pretty clear once I show a picture of it, so I'll get to that in the next slide. Modality, if it's completely optional, that just means there's a 0, which is marked by a little circle on a model diagram, where the cardinality is whether the max is a 1 or many. The n just means many. So this means you don't have to have any relationship, but at the most, if there is a relationship, there's at most you have 1. This one, you don't have to have a relationship, but you can have many if you do have a relationship. This one is mandatory, it's not optional. You have to have at least 1 relationship, but you can have no more than 1 relationship. This one, you have to have at least 1, but you can have many. That's what these different options mean. So what that looks like when you see a graph, and this is what the questions on the exam are going to be like, it'll show you a picture of something like this, like nation to stock. And you'll notice the circle and the straight line right here. That's the modality or the optionality. What this is saying, before now we've just said, okay, nation can have many stocks, but a stock can only have 1 nation. 1 stock belongs to just 1 nation. But like stock 203 belongs to the United States. That stock belongs only to 1 nation. But nation, the United States, it can have many different stocks. That's what this is saying. But then the modality, this circle and this line, this bar right here, what this is saying is whether or not the relationship is optional or not. What this is saying, because the circle is on this side where the many, so a nation can have many stocks, but it doesn't have to have any. It's optional. A nation can have 0 or many stocks. So like, let's say you just added a nation to the table. You just added Chad to the table. It's, I don't know, some nation that you weren't keeping track of before, but you don't have any stocks listed for it yet, and that's okay. You can have a nation that has 0 stocks in the stock table. But if you look the other way, so it just has a 1, it's going a straight line, so that means it's a stock relates only to one nation, but it has this bar. That means the relationship has to exist the other way. If a stock exists in the stock table, it has to be related to a nation. You can't have a stock and then have a 0, a stock just floating without being related to a nation. It has to have at least, it must have one nation attached to it, and since it's a 1 relationship, it's at most 1 as well. So minimum 1, max 1. This is minimum 0, max many. Any questions on that? Happy to explain that in some other way or anything. And let me just go over one more example. Okay, Ben, yeah. You can unmute your mic or go on the chat.
Hello?
Hey, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, oh, sorry. So does each entity have a modality and a cardinality?
Yes. So let me show an example of it. I pulled up the classic models diagram. Oops. One thing just crashed. Here, give me 1 second. Something just happened. Okay, we're back. Okay, so if you've been looking at this like your whole semester, probably without knowing too much of what it means. The way it shows it in MySQL Workbench is it shows a line here. It shows 2 lines. One line just means it's a 1-sided relationship, or the maximum is 1. If it has 2 lines, then that means the minimum is 1 as well. For example, this one. An employee has to have an office, but it can only have 1 office. It only belongs to 1 office. So it's not optional because it has a line, and then it's showing another line showing that it's just a 1, like an employee has 1 office. Whereas offices, it has the line showing that it's mandatory, it's not optional. Offices must have at least 1 employee, but they can also have many employees. Whereas you go to customers, it has 1 line showing that it's just a maximum of 1. So a customer has a max of 1 employee that is their sales rep, but they don't have to. That relationship is optional. So they have a minimum of 0, but a maximum of 1. An employee has to have 1 customer attached to it, but can have many customers if they want. Does that make sense?
So would employees be 1, n, or would that be customers?
So in the just so you're aware, in the exam, we don't actually use that 1, n relation notation, but just to answer the question. So the relationship of employees to customers would be 1, n. The relationship of customers to employees, going from left to right that way, that would be 0, 1. So right here, this would be on this side of the relationship, it's a 0, 1. Right here, this is a 1, n, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So just one thing to, let me see, does that picture show? Okay, so just one thing that if it's not clear, do I still have that other one? Okay, so in the textbook notation, see how this doesn't have a line?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a one-to-many relationship with the client being the one side. If it's not showing modality, then in the textbook notation, if it's not showing modality, it doesn't use a straight line to show a one-sided relationship. It just uses this straight line with the crowfoot branching out thing like that. But if it does show it, if it's wanting to show modality, then it adds the bar with the circle there. In MySQL Workbench, it always, if it's a one-sided, it always has at least one bar if it's a one-sided relationship. And then it'll just show the circle if it's optional, or it'll show 2 lines if it's mandatory. So just the difference between like this one line with the circle and many, that type of relationship is the exact same thing as what's being shown here, just flipped. Just for or actually no, sorry, that was wrong because the 0 is on the many. Is there an example of it? Okay, this is an example of it. Where we have the 0 and many, that's just like the 0 and many here. And then this is a one-sided not optional or one-sided mandatory. When it's one-sided mandatory, they show 2 lines in MySQL Workbench. So sorry, it's just kind of dumb that we have 2 different ways of displaying it, but that's how it is. So, any questions there? Happy to go over any other examples. Cool. If any of you come up with any other questions like that, just let me know. Try and answer them. But that's it for the multiple choice. Again, it's 15 questions. I think if you understand the principle of modality and cardinality, like an example of what the question would be true or false. Customers must have at least one payment. And the answer to that would be false because it has this little circle, so it's optional. So a customer can exist without a payment. Or it might be true or false. If a payment exists, a customer must exist for that payment. And the answer would be true because we have the 2 lines here, meaning the minimum has to be 1. So if a payment exists, a customer has to exist that is attached to that payment. That's exactly what the test questions are going to be like. It'll show you like 2 entities connected or something like that, and then say, can a customer exist without a payment? True or false? It'll be exactly like that. So if you can answer a question like that, then you're in good shape as far as that modality is concerned. So any questions with that? Yeah, JC?
So that second line is the max. So the min is 1 and the max is 1?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah. Minimum of
Okay.
1, maximum of 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. But the point I was making with this is if it shows the textbook notation, right here the minimum was 1 and the maximum is 1 here as well. It's just in the textbook notation it only shows 1 line for the modality, if that's unclear. So minimum of 1, maximum of 1, textbook notation looks like this. MySQL Workbench, it looks like this. So, cool. Okay, then we have, and this part is going to be on ELC when you take it. You should be able to see it right now, you just shouldn't be able to open it. It is right here, final exam, multiple choice. So you'll take that, you have the 45 minutes, you put all your answers in here, and it's just like a normal quiz. So that's how that works. Okay, then this part is a little different. Second part, you have a 4-hour time limit. So you'll notice when you go to quizzes, you have this section right here. Once you open this up, you have a 4-hour time limit, except you're not submitting any of your answers here. All the questions are going to be given here. So you're going to open this up, and then it'll be like a quiz where it's going to show you, okay, question 1 for SQL, find this, do this kind of query. But instead of submitting your answers in this quiz to be graded, if you go over to assignments, my computer's being real slow now. You go to final exam, there's a final exam submission folder. When you go into it, there's going to be just a document that you can download, and that's what I want you to put your answers in. Just pretty similar to how the midterm was with the, there's going to be this first name, last name, final Stefan. So you'd put like petty JC _ final Stefan and just submit that. I'm also attaching the documents that you'll use for the exploratory, just in case you need them. So I'd recommend opening up this submission document first, just to make sure it's all there, and then start the quiz. Once you start the quiz, you have 4 hours to submit the document under the assignments. And there's 3 parts to this 4-hour part. The first is the SQL. Because I had those questions that I wanted to go over. How about I just go over, let me go over the other 2 sections, and then I can just end with the SQL and us going over the examples. So you can do them in any order you want. It's all just in one submission document. So I'm just going to skip this for now and come back to it in a second. The second part is the modeling, worth 15 points. This is just like the midterm. It's going to give you like a few paragraphs describing a situation, and then in MySQL Workbench, you're going to create a model. So if you were able to do the ones on the midterm, it's really pretty similar to it. Expect something with around 7 to 9 entities, including associative entities in that number, in that count. Really, if you just know how to do one-to-many, many-to-many relationships, the one-to-one, everything we've talked about of the different types of relationships, if you know how to do those, you should be good. Know when to add an extra column to the primary key. This is something I've talked about in the past a decent amount. If someone has a question on that, I can explain a little bit more. But since I haven't really, even though it talks about modality in the multiple choice, because we haven't practiced doing modality in actually creating a model, I'm not going to require anything about it. So when your submission, if you have circles here or a line here, I don't care. I just care that this is a one-to-many relationship. I don't care if it's optional or mandatory on either side. I'm just not going to even look at that, since I don't think I've given you enough time to practice it. So, any questions on the modeling? Okay. Cool. Okay, then exploratory. I'm not going to give you screenshots of what your output should look like, but I went through the descriptions of it, Everything in here is very similar to something you've already done in your past assignments, and like I purposely tried to make it quite simple. Basically, all you need to know is when you're given a data set, well, make sure you import it correctly. Check to see if there's any rows you need to skip or anything like that, like the videos have shown, to make sure you get the right rows as the headers. Know how to filter, like if it's like in group project 2, how I had you filter to only show a couple of dates, stuff like that. Know how to do a very simple pivot table, similar to the one in assignment 7. If you could do that pivot table where it was just showing the bridges and then the sums of the bike trips on the different days on each bridge, if you can do something like that, you're good. And then know how to do a join to get latitude and longitude. It's very similar to group project 2. You're going to be given 2 data sets. You have to join them together to get the latitude and longitude. Group project 2, you have to do 2 joins. It's simpler this time. You just have to do 1. And then you're just creating a map using that latitude and longitude. And the description should be pretty clear. It's not like in group 2, I could see how there's some confusion on what you were actually supposed to be showing, but it should be quite clear what you're supposed to be doing. It's honestly, I think this part is very, if you've been doing the assignments, I think this should be a free 25 points, in my opinion. But is there any, I'm happy to go over anything if anyone has questions on any part of this. Are there any questions or any doubts or anything that anyone wants to see? Okay. Yeah, Brent?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
So could you go over a quick example for when to add an extra column to the primary key?
Oh, for sure. So this part in modeling. Okay, so I think I did an example of this way back in Slack, so let me just give me a minute to find that, because that's probably going to be the quickest way I can show you. And sorry, I'm recording the video on Collaborate Ultra as well as on my own computer to upload to YouTube later. So everything on my computer is being really slow. So let me just give me a minute. Okay, so I think you'd asked this question before in here. This is the example I gave. Okay, so it's a similar type of situation. I'm trying to think of what the question would be. Just give me a minute. So let's say on the description of the problem, I said a department can have many employees, and an employee can be part of many different departments. And you describe that relationship as a position. So that position has a beginning date and an end date right here. But let's say the beginning date wasn't part of the primary key. Let's just imagine that asterisk was gone. If you had this table right here, because it's an identifying table, right? It's an identifying relationship. And let me just get out this Word document to maybe write it out. It's a little unclear. So right now we have position and position for its come position. Okay. So I'm going to ignore that begin date is part of the primary key right now. Just for right now, I'm going to ignore that. So the primary key, if we ignore that, because these are identifying, the primary key would be the department name and the employee ID, right? These would also, just for completeness sake, they would also be part of the, they would also be foreign keys. So you'd have department name and ID. They're primary keys. It's a composite primary key that consists of these two foreign keys. And we would add a beginning date to here as well. I'm just ignoring that for now. So let's say in the description of the question I said it is possible for an employee to hold or let's say hold more than one position at the same time in a department. Let's just say I gave an example like this. So the way it is, if I didn't have beginning date as part of the primary key, let's just let's just imagine what this table would look like. Let's just say we had, let me see if we do 2 of those. We'll do this. Okay, so let's say we had the department name and the employee ID, and we'll leave this empty for now. So let's say in department 1, employee 1 had a position. This is the position table right now. But then department 1 decides that employee ID employee number 1 is super awesome, and department 1 wants to give employee number 1 another position at the same time. If I did this with these two being the only primary keys, that isn't possible because primary keys can't repeat. So we have the combination of 1 and 1, and that's fine, it's unique, but as soon as we get 1 and 1 again, it's not possible for someone to hold 2 positions in the same department. But as soon as we add another column to the primary key, let's say beginning date, let's say he got this position on January 1st of 2020, then it's fine for employee 1 to have another position in department 1 as long as the beginning date is different. That's what this table is. Let's say he was given this one on the 15th of 2020. Now this employee can have 2 positions because we've added another column to the primary key. By adding an additional one, we just make it so we can repeat rows more, because the primary key, now that it's all 3, is different for each row. So does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And sorry, I didn't realize that applied to the same thing I'd already asked about.
Oh, no, it's fine. I think this is good because this gave me a chance to give an example of what this is kind of like the phrasing of what you'll see in the midterm modeling portion. I'll say something like this, where it's like it's possible for an employee to hold more than one position at the same time in the department. I'll say something along those lines that makes it clear that I want it able to repeat. So, cool.
Thanks.
Any other questions with this or any other clarifications? Alrighty then. Okay, with that, let's just jump into so project 2 open. Where is Here we go. Okay, so that's the exploratory, that's the modeling. Here's the SQL. So again, so it's going to be 5 questions. They're going to be given in the quiz. But in that document that you download, I want you to paste your SQL code as well as a screenshot of your results, just like in the assignments you've been doing all year. Basically the same thing, or very similar to how you did it on your midterm. Same idea. But in this case, for the final, we're not using the classic models database, you're using the Northwind database. If you did not already try it, if you go into MySQL Workbench, I've made it so you should all be able to use Northwind. So if you select star from, I don't know, I think there should be an employees table in there. So you should be able to see all this. If you can't, please just send me something in the chat right now or send me an email or something, but I've given access to every student, so you should be able to run queries like this now. The one thing that is stupid and annoying about this database, let me find it. Lots of NS databases. Okay, so you can see all the tables in here. If it's hard to see on the screen there, it's hopefully you're gonna see my screen here. You can see all the tables in here. You'll notice order details has a space between it. I don't know who made this database, but that's just how they did it. So if you try to do something like order space details, it's because there's a space and it expects table names to not have spaces, this is gonna not work. The way you have to do it is above the tab key on your keyboard, there's a special kind of accent. Sometimes it's called a grave accent, just depends on how you use it. But if you put it around them like that, if you put an accent in the beginning, it doesn't matter if there's a space, then you can run it and then it works. Or if you don't feel like doing that, there's something you could be doing this whole time is if you just double click the table name, it'll actually write it out for you using those for any one of these. So that'll also work. There's a few other tables in here, like summary of sales by quarter, but they don't have any data in them, and you don't use them, so you can just ignore those. The other ones with spaces are useless. But you will have to use the order details table, so just be aware of that. Yeah, right now, you have access to the database right now, so I just recommend looking through the different tables. On ELC, I also give you a PDF download of this. I would just download the PDF so that you can reference it during the test. I also put it in the submission document, so it's there as well. But just get familiar with it. And that should be it as far as the general information. Then what to study for, I purposely chose all of these points based on what the questions were on the final. There's 5 questions, and based on the things that you should know for those questions, I purposely made all of these bullet points. So honestly, I think if you study these really well, you should do good. And I made the practice questions based off of these same principles. So rather than just going over all these, let's just jump to the practice questions I gave you, because they go over all of these. So let's see, go here and let's see if I have Northwind. Okay, so I have Northwind open here as well. Let's just start off with this first one. Okay, so hopefully hopefully you've had time, but I'll try and just go through them. I'll go through them step by step, but I won't give you time to work. If you want, you can just try and work through these on your own at some other time if you don't want to watch me do the answers. But so first thing, display the month number and the number of orders made in each month. The point behind this is I just want you to have some practice using those date functions. So it's asking about the orders made each month. If we go to the orders table, so each row here is an order. We have a few different pieces of information about it, but the one we're caring about is the order date, when the order is made. It has a few different dates of when it's required to be there by or when it was actually shipped, but we just care about when it's ordered. So if you don't know what that looks like, we can do select star from orders. So each row is an order, this is what we got. But we want to look at the month of the order, and then the number of orders that we've made in there. What you can do is you have year, month, day functions. So when you have something that's a date or a date time, like order date is, you can tell because it always looks like this format. I didn't ask about year, but just to give an example of it. Like if I asked for the year of the order date, and I ran that, it's going to take that order date column, and it's just going to suck the year out of it, and then just display the year. So that's all we're getting right now. I can do the same thing for month, and it'll tell you if it's January through December, just using 1 through 12. So 7, so it's saying that's July, that's August, etc. And then day, it'll tell you which day of the month it was, so 1 through 31. So whatever month this was, this order occurred on the 4th day of that month. So this first question is just asking us about the month. So we can do month. The number of orders made in each month. So we're just wanting to look at the month, and then for January across every year, how many orders have we made in that? So what we want to do if we're wanting to show just the month and account in that, we need to group by that. So we can actually, we're grouping by order date, but then we're transforming it to only show the month. So then it's going to group by all the, like if it's sucking the month out of every one of them, and then it just has one, it'll group all the ones together, all the twos together, etc. So we can run that, then it's just showing, oops, group by. So then it's showing all those. I didn't say to, but just to make it look nice, let's just do an order by month. Date. Then we have those, but we still need the number of orders made in each month. So we can just do a count star. We're just working with one table, so doing a count star is pretty safe. You could do an order ID if that makes you feel better. Either works. Order ID. Same thing. But yeah, that's it. So across all years in January, they've sold 88. February, they've sold 83, or made, not sold, but ordered 83. There's been 83 orders. Any questions on this? Alrighty. Okay, then for the I have a solution there. Just delete that. So do the same thing. Sorry, I have this. I went through all these and wrote the solutions out, so I'll just hide those for now. Do the same thing, but show the month and then the day of each month with the count. Remember, you can group by two things. So the point of this is just more practice using these date functions. But in this case, I'm wanting to show the month and the day. So we want to keep it as the count. But just something I wanted to remind people of, we haven't done it too often in class. Every now and then we've done it in some assignments, but you can group by two things. So it's grouping by month, and then within that month, within the month of 1, for example, it's going to find every unique day in that month, and it's also going to group by that. So, and why don't we just order by it as well, just to make it look nice. We're in that? Okay. So since we've included two things in the group by, it's grouping by them both. So it's finding everything within January, and on the first day of January, across all the years, on the first day of January, there's been 5 orders. On the second day of January, there's been 3 orders. Scroll down, eventually we get to this. On May, first day of May, there's been 5 orders in all the history of the orders table. So you'll notice sometimes it might skip a day, like there's no 4. That just means no one at any point in time has ever ordered anything on January 4th. So there's nothing there, so we don't show it. And that's totally fine. So any questions here? Okay.
When I run mine, I get 300 rows. And I was wondering if the number of rows matters, like, or should it be the same?
So when you run the same query, you're only getting 300 rows returned?
Yeah, mine was slightly different. Like, I named month, order date as day and stuff, but like the same concept.
Could you post your code into the chat, and then I'll run it and see? Because something like that, renaming your stuff shouldn't change it. So let's clear that up to see what's going on. Okay. Oh, interesting. So 1, 1 is 5, 1, 2, 3. Mine is returning 305 rows.
Okay, mine's still it's giving me 300.
Weird. And are you sure you're running it on Northwind? Or are you using, use Northwind? Run that and then do it. Because you might be doing the orders table from classic models.
Mine still says 300.
Wait, if anyone else runs this code here, I can, like, someone else just in the chat, just run the code and see. I did 1 and it's 305. 305. Okay, so when you go over on the left-hand side, when you're on Northwind, is it bolded when you run it?
Yes.
That is weird. Okay, when you run, try and copy and paste my code.
Okay.
And run that and see if you get 305. It might, because you do the aliases up here, but select is after group by. So
I still get 300.
Still get 300. Okay, I have no idea why that's happening. That is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So just, I guess just do what you normally would. I'll try and think of if there's something I can think of, but if you're using the same database, there should be no difference between them. I'll just do your queries as they normally are on all these and on the exam. And if I see any differences between them, maybe I'll send you an email or something like that. But you should be fine. If it's only 5 rows, that means you're maybe missing a row or two. So maybe some counts might be slightly off, but I'll see that and be able to address that. But yeah, I have no idea why that's happening. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, sorry about that. It's really weird. Okay. Okay, so here's another button. Okay, so any other last questions on these examples? Okay, and sorry, I know this is going kind of long. I'll try and get through this pretty quick. But so show the first and last name in one column with a space of employees, followed by a count of people that report to that employee. Include employees that don't have anyone report to them. So what we're looking at is we're in the Northwinds, and we are looking at the employees. This is very similar to the classic models in that you have employees, all the information about them, you have employee ID, and then you have reports to, which is the foreign key for this recursive one-to-many relationship, where the reports to, so you have an employee, and then if that employee reports to someone, the employee ID of the person they report to is present under this reports to column right here. So we've done examples of recursive before, and it's very similar in this database as well. So let's, before we even get into the columns, just to start off with the select star from employees. And we know that we have, like I like to do in class before, where we just call them exactly what we mean by them. And so let's say we have the supervisor. This is the person that they are reporting to. Join employees supervised. So this is the person underneath them. What we're going to do is the supervisor. So in this column right here, we have the person that they report to being given here. So that means if we want the supervisor to be the person that they're reporting to, and this is the employee of the person above them, that means we want the supervisor to use the employee ID, and that will equal the person under them, supervised dot reports to. I think this is the hardest part of recursive, is not getting these mixed up. And in class, I did the thing where I drew on the whiteboard 2 separate copies of them. But I just think the important thing to remember is, and if it helps, you can even just look at the table before we do anything. Select star from employees. So we have Nancy DeVolio. So there's someone, and in there there's an employee, and they report to someone. So if we want to get the person above them, that means we need to have the supervisor be the employee ID, whereas the supervised is going to be that reports to. And if that's confusing, I can try and explain it in another way, but for this example where we want to be showing the supervisor, that's what we need. So if we just run that, We're doing supervisor first, so first we're showing the person above them. So Andrew, we see how we're showing Andrew Fuller a whole bunch of times. That's because Nancy DeVolio, Janet Leverling, Margaret Peacock, Stephen Buchanan, they are all reporting to him. They're all reporting to number 2, and the employee ID of the person they report to is number 2, so it's Andrew Fuller. So we're saying show the first and last name in one column of employees, followed by a count of people that report to that employee. So we're wanting to show the first and last name of the person that is above these people, and then the count of the people below them. So we want the supervisor, not first name, but we want to put it in one column, so we need to concat that. And we want a space between it, so we add that. Supervisor dot last name. So right now it looks like that. But we're just repeating it because we've done this join, but we haven't grouped by anything. So let's group by, and we want to be showing the person above with the count of the people below. So make sure we group by the people that are above. So supervisor dot employee ID. So we have that. You'll notice it got rid of almost everyone, and we'll explain why that's why that happens in a minute. And then we want to counter them. So, and this is, okay, I'm going to do just to illustrate a point, I'm going to do a count star and a count of supervised dot employee ID. Just put this on like that, or this, so it's all there. Okay, so we're grouping by the supervisor employee ID, or the people that are above the other people. We're grouping by them, and then we're counting. What we want is a count of the number of people underneath them. So I've done a count star, and then I've also done a count of the supervised employee ID. And you'll notice it's the exact same thing. And for these two people, this is correct. Andrew Fuller has 5 people that are below him, or 5 people that are reporting to him. And Stephen Buchanan has 3 people that are reporting to him. But I said here, include employees that don't have anyone report to them. Or in other words, include, if I was an employee here, I'd want Jacob Stefan, but he has 0 people reporting to him. Just to illustrate a point, I'm going to copy this so you can look at both of them. Correct, but missing employees that don't have report to them. It's between using count star and count. Okay, so I'm just going to replace this join with a left join. And before I click run, just try and think of what's going on here. Before, in the first one, we're saying join the supervisor and supervised if there's a match between the employee ID and reports to. But let's say that there's employees that don't report to anyone, or employees that don't have anyone beneath them, or in other words, employees that don't have a match in reports to their own employee ID, because there's no one beneath them, there's no one reporting to them. Because we're joining on this, and we're doing an inner join, which is what join means, we're filtering those rows out. But if we do a supervisor and then we do a left join, meaning we're keeping all these employees, but then we only, we're keeping those, and then if they're available, we are attaching anyone beneath them, then we're able to change we're keeping all the supervisors that don't have anyone beneath them by doing a left join. Because we're keeping all supervisors, and then for those supervisors that do have people that are under them, that are supervised, we'll join them, but if they're not there, we still keep the supervisor. We run that, and you'll notice we get pretty different results. First off, we're getting all the employees that don't report to anyone at all, which is represented by the supervised.employee ID. But the other point I want to get across with this example is that there's a difference between using count star and counting supervised.employee ID. And the correct answer is with the supervised employee ID. Nancy DeVolio doesn't have anyone report to them, so the true answer is 0. But if you do a count star, it's going to count the row of Nancy DeVolio herself as 1. And if that's unclear, one way to show what's going on is let's get rid of the group. Get rid of the count so it'll run. And let's do straight. What would I include? Supervisor.employee ID, supervised.employee ID. Oops. And let's order by supervisor. Okay. Let's do the same thing here. Order by. Okay, so let's look. Notice here that Nancy, because we did a left join, even though she doesn't have anything to join on, we did a left join, so it's keeping Nancy in there. But she doesn't have anyone underneath her. There's no supervised that matches, so these are left null. Andrew Fuller, though, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has all these people underneath him. So you'll notice a 5 here. But Nancy, she has 0 people underneath her. So when we do a count of the number of people underneath her, the answer should be 0. But if we come up here where we're grouping all these people together and then we're counting, you can see the difference between a count star and count supervised.employee ID. We're getting, if we want to count of the number of people under them, we really want a count of the supervised. And this makes it so there's a difference between count star and counting a specific column whenever we do left joins. Because if we just count every column with a count star, we're going to end up counting every row with a count star. We're just counting for employee ID, Nancy DeVolio. Yeah, they have a row. sure, it's null here, but a row still exists, so we're going to count 1. But if we just count the number of rows under employee ID for the supervised, it's null, so we don't count that, so we get to 0. So we want to make sure in the test count using a correct column right here. So you get a count of 0 when you need to. This is wrong, this is correct. Sorry if that was kind of long, but hopefully that illustrates the difference. Are there any questions with that? Okay, cool. Okay. Those are just the answers I've done before. Okay. Okay, this is an example of a correlated subquery. So this one is asking us for each employee title. So employees have a specific title. So there's different types of employees is one way you could think of it. If you're confused of what that would look like, you can just look at the employees table. Employees. So we have a few different sales representatives, we have a few different sales managers, or maybe just one. So for some of them, there's just one, for others, there's repeats. But for each type of employee, for each title of employee, find the one employee that has assisted in the order with the largest order freight. What's the employee title, the first and last name of the employee, and the freight. So employees right here, you see they have a connection to orders, and orders have a freight right here, which is just a number. So for each type of employee, we want to find the employee that helped with the order that had the highest number of freight for that type of employee. So this is a good example of a correlated subquery because we want to find the highest number of freight for that title of employee. So that number might change depending on what the title of employee was, so we need to address that in our subquery, thus making it a correlated subquery. So first, let's start off with, let's just call this employees e.title. We don't even need the E there, but let's keep it first name, last name, and then we want the freight. Let's join orders O E dot employee ID is O dot E. Okay, I think we're good so far. Does that work? Okay, so our join is correct, but we are only wanting where the freight is equal to, and this we want the largest order freight. Okay, so the freight we want it to be equal to select. So you want the highest freight, but only for that type or title of employee. So let's get the freight. So we want the max freight from orders, right? So this would work. This would give us the max freight, but it would only give us the max of all orders. But what we want is the max for the type for that title of an employee. And because we don't have access to the title of employee and orders, that's part of the employees table, we need to do a join to get it within the subquery. So let's, just to keep track of these, I'm going to call that one O2. Join employees E2 on O2.employee ID equals E2.employee ID. And this is where we make it a correlated subquery, where the E2 dot title is equal to E dot title. So we're saying is get the max freight from the orders table, but where the title is equal to whatever the current row whatever the title of the current row is. And if that employee didn't have the max weight for that title, it's going to filter it out because we only want the freight that equals the max for that title. So we can run that. And there we have it. It could be possible that there's a tie, that multiple employees had a tie for it, and then it would show them, and that's fine. In this case, there's only one for each. So for the vice president of sales, Andrew Fuller had the highest freight, was involved with the order with the highest freight of 810. But the highest freight is different for sales representatives. In this case, the highest was 1007.64, and Janet Leverling was involved with that. It's different for the sales manager, and it's different for the inside sales coordinator. So these are tricky, these correlated subqueries. So I'm happy to, I don't know, are there any questions regarding this one? Yeah, JC?
When I thought about doing it, I know in a previous assignment we had to select the max and then from, and then we did parentheses, and then we did another select statement. Would that be selecting the max of like a count or something? That's why it wouldn't work in this instance.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is the case. If I asked you to find what the max sum of the freight was, then you'd have to do that. Because you're doing a function, you'd be finding the sum of the freight, but then of the sums, you need to find the maximum value of that. Then you'd do what you did in the assignments, where you're doing an inner query within an inner query like that, or a subquery in a subquery. But in this case, where I'm not asking for the sum of the freight, I'm just asking for the highest freight, you don't have to do that. You just have to do one inner query, and then we're just making it correlated like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll make that clear that if it's, I'll say it should be the sum of the freight if I want you to do something like that, like on your past assignments. But if I don't say sum or average or anything like that, if I'm just saying the largest freight, all I have to do is find the max freight. Otherwise, I would say the largest sum of the freights, like grouped by title or whatever. So, cool. Any other questions? Alrighty, okay. Let's so list each country that customers are from, along with a column called order description, indicating if they have a high number of orders, a medium number of orders, or a low number of orders. Low is 0 to 18 orders, medium is 19 to 80 orders, and high is 81 orders and up. be sure to include customers that may not have made an order. So we look here, we have customers, and customers are from different countries. And customers can make many different orders. So this query is asking us the customers within each country, in other words, grouped by the country, so we get a count according to the country. Rather than just a raw count of the orders, we want to know if they're in these different categories of high, medium, or low. So this is a good practice for case statements. So before we start that, let's just get the join correct. So we have customers, customer C. We can join orders on C dot customer ID equals O dot customer ID. Okay, so that's working well. And we want to be showing the country, looks like that's capitalized. The country that they're from. Group by country, if we were to run that, then we just have the country showing. So that's cool. And just as a segue to what we want the final answer to be, basically we're wanting to look at the count, but if the count is between certain numbers, we want to change what that looks like. So if we did a count of, let's do O.order ID. So then we're getting a count of each of these countries, how many orders each country has made, or a count of how many customers within each country have made. But instead of this count, we're wanting to show, just for clarity's sake, I'll leave this here and then do the case statement next to it so you can see what's going on. But we want to do a column called order description that's giving us a description of if it's high, medium, or low. So let's say we have a case when, and I think there's a few different ways, and I'll show a few different examples. First, I'll do it just by doing a one-sided comparison of a less than. So I'll do case when count order ID is less than or equal to 18, then low number of orders. So if it's equal to 18 or less than that, then it's low. But we have other instances we want to keep track of. Come on, keyboard. Okay. When the count of O.order is less than or equal to 80, then medium number of orders. So the way case statements work is the first thing that becomes true, it stops there and outputs that, and it doesn't look at the other stuff. So you might be thinking when I do count of order ID that's less than 80, that's also true of the ones that are low, but because I'm doing it after the low ones, it works. Because if it's not less than 18, then it has to be over 18, so then it skips this and goes to the next one until it gets to 80, then it'll go to the other one. So if it's at max 18, but if it's over 18 but below or equal to 80, then it's a medium number of orders. You can do, if it's above 80, then do a high number of orders. But if you want to do something quicker, because these are the only 3 options, we don't have anything else, you can just do an else. Else high number of orders. Because if it's not a part of low or medium, then it has to be a part of high. You end a case statement with end, and we want to call this order description. That's what I said in the question. So the case statement ended with end, but I'm just going to put as, and then that's going to be the name of the column now. So if I do this, this should be it, and there we go. So I didn't say to include this count, I just left it in so it's clear what's going on. But 122, that's over 80, so it's a high number. 28, that's between 19 and 80, so it's a medium. You have a low number of orders there. Then just the last part of this, I say be sure to include customers that may not have made an order. And they would be in the low number because they're at 0. If you want to include those, because remember by doing a join, an inner join, it's only going to include customers that have orders. So if you do left join, it'll also include those. This will only display if there's an entire country that hasn't made orders. In this case, there's customers that don't have a country listed, so then it just includes them. They haven't made any orders, so it includes them in low. But you notice it's a 22 and a 21, so there is a difference between the left and an inner join. So any questions there? Okay. That's what I did here. I'll show you this example as well. So use between. Okay, so if you don't really like doing this, I think this is just quicker, but you get the same exact results if you use between. That's another thing you can do. So the count is between 0 and 18, and between is inclusive, so it includes 18 and 0. Then it's a low number of orders. Or if the count is between 19 and 80, then it's medium. Otherwise, it's a high number of orders. So same exact thing. Medium, high, low. So either works. Just another example of that. Okay, any other questions with that one? Okay. Yeah, JC?
I have one more question. So, like, when you use commas on the case when statements, like some examples have commas between each when statement, but if you do that, it doesn't like it. So, do you not use commas between each line?
Yeah, putting commas makes it look like it doesn't work. Where were you seeing the commas?
Like in the PowerPoints, but they structured it a little different. Like the count was on the outside. Like that was to get the numbers in the rows.
I'd have to look at the example. I could get back to you on that. Do you know which PowerPoint it was? Is it in the review slides?
I don't remember which one it was. Sorry. But I saw it earlier and I tried using commas and it didn't work.
Yeah, so just don't use commas and it should be fine. I'm wondering maybe in another version of SQL, like if you're doing maybe if you're doing like Postgres SQL or if you're doing Microsoft SQL Server, it might require commas. I forget just because it's been a bit of time since I've used those, but it looks like MySQL it messes it up. So yeah, just keep the commas out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and is this the last one? Okay, last one, and this one's not that complicated. I just want to do a review of how to do the percents. So, okay, display each category and the percent of products that fall under that category out of all products. Round the number to 2 decimals and add a percent sign. So we have categories, and a product can be, there are many products within a category, but a product belongs to one particular category. So let's just start out select star from category C. Oh, come on. Join. I think I checked, and every category has a. There's no categories that don't have any products, so an inner join or a left join will be the same. If you want to play it safe, you can keep it as a left join. Either works. On the final, if I am wanting you to make sure that you count something, if it has 0, I'll say something like, be sure to count a category if it has 0 products as well. I'll put a statement like that. That's basically a hint to use a left join. In this case, it doesn't say that, and it doesn't matter if you use one, but I'll just use it for fun. Equals C dot category ID equals P dot category ID. It's working, right? No. As a categories. And products. Okay. They made them all plural in this, I think. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that's why, if you're watching me as I do this, that's why I usually just start with a select star and get my join statement working, because if I've written out the whole query and it's all complicated with parentheses and everything, and it turns out I just made a dumb mistake in writing out category instead of categories, on the test that's super annoying to try and figure out where you messed up. So I try to write the simplest thing first and make sure it works, and then I move on to the more complicated stuff. That's just a tip if you tend to run into problems like that. Group by, then let's just group by the category ID. ID. And do the category name. So that's working, and then we can do a count of the p dot product ID. Okay, so we're seeing a count that of products that each category has. So I'll try and do what this tip says, just because every now and then I'll get like a Slack message or an email or someone in their assignment, they turned it in, but they're like, I tried, I just couldn't get my percent to work. I just couldn't. And they have it almost right. They're just like, they put in extra parentheses where they didn't need to or something like that. If I were you, I think what happens is some of you look up how to do a percent from a past problem, and you try then you try typing it out all at once, and that can work if you write it correctly, but it can just be hard to not make little mistakes. So if I were you, I would just start with a count. So this is the count of every product. We know that's what we want as our numerator. We know the denominator is, we say, display each category in percent of products that fall under that category out of all products. So we want a count of all products. So we do a select count star from products. This is just going to give us the number of products total and then the number in that specific category. So we get the start of our fraction. Okay, so we have it like that, but we want to express it in terms of a percent, so we need to be multiplying this by 100. You can do the 100 at the top or at the bottom, it doesn't matter. We can run that, make sure it works, make sure we didn't mess anything up. Okay, so we basically have what we want, it just isn't looking as pretty as we want it. So then we want to add the round function. So we have round and we begin with the parentheses. We take the whole number that we want to round, which is this whole thing. We put a comma, then we want to round it to 2 spots. So we put a 2. We end with a parentheses. So there we go. Now it's rounded. Then let's add a concat to it so that we can have the percent sign at the end. So we do a concat. We start, this is the first thing in the concat, is this whole thing up until the last parentheses. We do a comma because that's just how concat is. It has one input here, then we do a comma and then do the next input, which is you want a percent sign. We close the parentheses. And there we go. And then I could ask you, I didn't ask it in this case, but I could ask you to order by this. And when you do an order, just instead of doing the concat, because sometimes strings mess up the ordering of number data, just do it up into where the round part is. You can even put it down here before you do the concat to keep it being from confusing. I'll do order by that. And there we go. The percent rounded to the second place, and we stuck a percent sign at the end of it. So produce, the products under the produce category account for 6.49% of all the products that are available in the products table. That's what it's telling us. So, any questions on this one? Alrighty, are there any questions on anything I've gone over, SQL or otherwise? Okay, then thanks for sticking around for this very long review. Again, I think if you can do these questions, these are a pretty good indicator of the difficulty and the just the type of questions that are going to be on the exam. They won't be exactly like these. Like for example, I think the percent one is combined with one that's more like one of the other above ones. So I tried to like mix and match the principles of them throughout the different practice queries. But I think if you can do these, you're in good shape. But like always, I'll just stick around for an extra 5 minutes just in case anyone else comes up with a question. Otherwise, you can peace out. And yeah, I'll post this code. Let me just I'll just wait around just in case someone thinks of a question, and if I do another example or something like that. But yeah, I'll post this to Slack right after I'm done with this video. Yeah, that's it. So thanks. Hopefully you guys do good. And thanks for a good semester. Exploratory part, we're just going to be submitting a screenshot with our answers. Yeah. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do any explanation or anything. Yep. Yeah, so pretty simple.
I had one question about one of the queries.
Okay. One of the ones that I just went over?
That's it. Yes. Let me find the number of it. It was the one with the recursive relationship.
Okay, the employees one.
Mm-hmm.
This one?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I noticed when I just did a regular join, and we were looking to see who reports to who.
Yeah.
There was Andrew Fuller, and Andrew Fuller report, or I think it's Stephen Buchanan reports to Andrew Fuller. Like if you were to run, like I ran the whole thing out with
without the group by.
Sorry, I'm trying to. I just joined it, and I did a select star. Like I just did all of it.
So you're saying who reports to who?
Stephen Buchanan reports to Andrew Fuller, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. When I ran it with select star, and like I saw 5 employees go to Andrew Fuller, and I saw Stephen Buchanan go. Andrew Fuller. Maybe I'm thinking of it weird, but I like thought that it would be 8 and not 5 because Stephen Buchanan's a supervisor, but he's also reporting to a supervisor. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, so for example, when I'm just looking at these, so Steve Buchanan has 3, and then because Steve Buchanan has because Steve Buchanan reports to Andrew Fuller, it's almost like there's 8 people underneath Andrew Fuller.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying. Okay, so let me show the first and last name of employees followed by a count of people that report to that employee. What I meant with that question is because, at least from how the data is written, where it has just a reports to column, and they only report to one employee. These 3 people technically don't report to Andrew Fuller. They're under Andrew Fuller in a sense because Steve reports to Andrew, but they don't report to Andrew Fuller. So only 3 actually report to Steven and 5 report to Andrew Fuller. But that is a good catch. If you had a question like that on the test or something, you could send me an email or anything like that if you wanted me to clear that up. But yeah, that was just how you interpreted the question. But that is a good catch, though. That is interesting.
Also, I was going to ask about one thing. I was looking over my notes, and I saw referential integrity constraint. I was like wondering what that means again.
It's not going to be on the test, but a referential integrity constraint is basically just a primary key, foreign key. That's just a fancy name for it. What it means is like, let's see an example. Let's just do this. If it runs, there we go. Okay, so products have a category ID, right? And that is referencing the primary key of category from the categories table. So there's a primary key, foreign key constraint there. So the referential integrity constraint is just a reference to that. What that means is when a column is referring to something else, they have to have integrity, or in other words, they have to be the same. And that is enforced with a constraint. What that means is, let's say I added a product. Let's just say I added, I don't know, let's say I added maple syrup. And that was, but then in the category ID, I put 64. And there's no matching 64 in the categories table. The referential integrity constraint, the constraint part, means that SQL would stop me from inserting 64. It would say there's no matching 64 in the category table, therefore you cannot put in 64. That's what it means.
Okay.
So basically what we've been doing this whole semester. Whenever we are joining on primary keys and foreign keys and stuff, that's the referential integrity constraint is just a fancier way of saying that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I think that was it.
All right.
I was trying to connect cardinality and modality with identifying and non-identifying relationships, but I haven't really looked at that yet. But
yeah, they're kind of identifying is always going to be mandatory, if you want to look at it that way.
Okay.
So there's some relationship between them, but they're not. They're different concepts, but there's some, I guess, overlap between them. At least that's almost always the case. Pretty sure that's a rule, but I'm not gonna. Yeah, there's not gonna be a question like that in the exam. So.
Well, thank you for all the help.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry that this went on for like an hour longer than I thought it would, but hopefully it was helpful. So.
Yeah, it was helpful.
Awesome. Okay, well, good luck on the exam. If you have any other questions, feel free to send me an email or message or anything on Slack, anything like that. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you.